Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Test Those Breasts podcast. I am your host, Jamie Vaughn. I'm a retired teacher of 20 years and a breast cancer thriver turned staunch, unapologetic, loud supporter and advocate for others, bringing education and awareness through a myriad of medical experts, therapists, caregivers, and other survivors. A breast cancer diagnosis is incredibly overwhelming with the mounds of information out there, especially on Dr. Google. I get it. I'm not a doctor, and I know how important it is to uncover accurate information, which is my ongoing mission through my nonprofit. The podcast includes personal stories and opinions from breast cancer survivors and professional physicians, providing the most up-to-date information at the time of recording. Evidence, research, and practices are always changing, so please check the date of the recording and always refer to your medical professionals for the most up-to-date information. I hope you find this podcast a source of inspiration and support from my guests. Their contact information is in the show notes, so please feel free to reach out to them. We have an enormous breast cancer community ready to support you in so many ways. Now let's listen to the next episode of Test Those Breasts. Hey friends, welcome to part 2 of my conversation with Jake Messier, the guy with stage 4 breast cancer. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I highly recommend going back first because Jake shares the reality of being a man diagnosed with breast cancer and the isolation and stigma that can come with that. In this second half, we get into survivorship, stage 4 breast cancer, scanxiety, advocacy, mental health, and how Jake is using his experience to help others. So let's jump back in. I want to talk about, first of all, what were your treatments like?
So I think it's funny because I think because my oncologist will tell you, I don't know anything how to treat you any differently than women. That's largely how I get treated, right? I went through 20 weeks of chemo, that was sort of standard. And then I went through a mastectomy, which they did not get clear margins. And so they went in again 10 days later. And then about 2 months later, they found a handful of other tumors. And so they had to go in again. So I had 3 surgeries in total, and then I made it to radiation, and then I went into this NED status, right? And that was great for about 8 months. And then they found another tumor on my hip, which is the one that I just went through about a year of trying to tackle that one. When it metastasized, they went to bone mets, and I got it on my hip. And just on Tuesday, we received word that that tumor is dead or dying, according to my radiation oncologist. And so that's really, really exciting news. And so I think it's the same standard of care, right? It's chemo, it's surgery, it's radiation, and then it's endocrine therapy, right? It's long-term tamoxifen, Verzenio. I do the same things as sort of anybody else in breast cancer.
Okay. I noticed that you have sleeves. Do you have lymphedema? What? Yeah. Okay. Yep. So for my audience,
so I do have lymphedema in my right. Yep.
Okay. All right. Yeah, those sleeves are pretty. I actually have a few sleeves. I had lymph nodes removed, and I try to wear them when I'm exercising or something like that, where it's where I know my arm or my hand or whatever might swell and things like that. You have to be really careful about that. And I didn't really know anything about that. And I interviewed a therapist towards the beginning of when I started podcasting on Test Those Breasts, and she told me all the things I couldn't do. I was like, I can't sit in the hot tub. I can't. And I still do some of those things, but she just said, just know that lymphedema can kind of rear its ugly head at any time in your life.
Correct.
If you've had lymph nodes removed. Okay. So you went through the treatment, yesterday or the day before. You got some good news. And then there was and then. Is that what they called it?
My and then post. Yeah, that's what I sort of call it, right? Like I said, we went through about a year, 10 months of tracking, trying to get this all under control. And then I went through radiation in December. And this was my first scan after that to see if, the radiation worked. And it was a difficult, I didn't think I would have to go back to radiation. It was sort of definitely, I had done radiation before and I was like, I'm done with that. And then all of a sudden they're like, you have to go back to radiation. I'm like, wait, what? That was definitely something to get, I didn't think I'd always have to go back in. When I come to Tuesday, when they're reading me and they say, yeah, the tumor is dead or dying, and there's a space in the bone that will be sort of forever there. It'll fill with scar tissue, but the tumor won't be in that space anymore, right? But the hole will be in the bone, but it'll fill up with scar tissue. And I was like, my wife and I were like, fantastic. Like, this is great news. This is the thing that we've been chasing for 10 months. We finally have, some kind of confirmation from a person with an MD next to their name that this is working, right? Great. And then so we're like, okay, well, thank you so much. And she's like, well, then we have more to talk about. And I'm like, of course we do. And that's sort of one of the things that I had to learn early on. And I think I had a much easier time learning it than my wife did, which was that this is not going to be a linear path, right? This is not somebody can, my wife is a project manager, right? She is, column A and column B have to equal column C. And then on the first day of when they mapped out this, you're going to have 20 weeks of chemo, and then you're going to have a surgery, and you're going to have 5 weeks of radiation, and then you're going to be just fine. That's what I was sort of told when I had stage 2, right? And my wife put all of her stock into that plan, right? And very early on, things start going sideways, and and you're like, wait, what do you mean? We had a plan, and what do you mean we're not going to be able, And I didn't get to radiation until almost a year after me, all of these things. And so I think it's a really important thing to learn that while you may have a plan, it can get derailed at any time.
Yep.
And that came on Tuesday, right? Where we had this wonderful conversation about how we have tracked down and basically eliminated this tumor. But, the and then part, which is they found a 5 millimeter spot. No one is calling it a tumor yet, but they found this 5 millimeter spot, which is the size of a pea, on my aorta, that over the next 2 PET scans, we're going to be watching to see if this develops into something. Now, they don't want to do a biopsy right away because it's sitting on my aorta, and I don't want to do that either, right? So let's avoid that until we have to. But it's a very frustrating place to be, right? And I try to be as positive and as upbeat, and I am. I know I am. But over the past couple of days, I'm like, man, like all I wanted was that first part. I wanted the first part of that conversation, right? I know I expressed that in the video that I put out there. All I wanted, and it's not necessarily for me, right? If I'm going to be completely honest, it's for my wife and my kids and my family, so that they don't have to be looking over their shoulder nonstop, right? It's I am stage 4. I don't get to go on a vacation from this, right? Even if we go on a vacation to Aruba, I'm still going to be stage 4 in Aruba, right? You can take a vacation from your job or your, whatever you want to take a vacation from, right? But you can't take a vacation from this. If we go somewhere, then I'm still going to be stage 4, and that's still going to be ever present when I'm there. But I want my family, I want my wife, who's my primary caregiver, to not have that crisis, that constant crisis in her mind, right? And yes, having this tumor gone does provide a ton of relief for us, right? It does, and I can't say that it doesn't. But as soon as they set up my next PET scan, right, for July 25th or whatever it was, I'm now looking at that date going, oh my God, is that the day I'm going to find out that this is now another tumor, right? And so the scanxiety started so much earlier than normally it does. Usually I'm about a week out and I'm like, oh my God, my scan's coming up, and I start getting all the anxiety that comes with my scan. Now, because this just popped up, it won't be for the whole 3 months of me waiting. It's, there'll be times and days that I don't think about it, but it will be ever present in my mind for a majority of that time. So yeah, I think this is an important lesson. Anybody watching this can use me as an example, right? And know that it's normal to be extremely frustrated. That we hunted this thing down. we went after it, we killed it. And then, oh yeah, by the way, we got to look at this next thing, right?
Yep.
And then, so this may be another 10 months of tracking this thing and then going in and doing radiation, because the doctor already said we can go in there and get it with radiation and it'll be okay. But then I'm like, okay, well then there will be a next one, right? And that's where I'm just like, oh, I'm just tired of the fight, right? Sometimes you want that break, right? You want to be, but you don't ever get it, that is a mental hurdle you have to get over. It's something that I've had to, I'm glad that I just posted the video of me getting the results yesterday, right? That was 2.5 days after I received my results, which gives me 2.5 days to process that. But I'm also glad that I have a little video bank to not be producing anything today. And to, I hardly ever post on the weekends. And if I do post on the weekends, it's about my family or doing something else, because it all can't be about cancer, right? It has to be about other things. It has to
right.
be. And so I'm glad that I get, off until Monday before I have to start processing this again, because it's difficult for me, and I think for anybody, to go through this where you finally get to the end of something and then you're like, well, then there's the end then. And that's the part that's defeating and frustrating, but at the same time, it's just part of this. And so you can either let it get you down, or you can sit in it for a day or two and then move on, like I'm going to, right? That's what I'm going to have to do over the next, day or two, is just, okay, well, it's just the next thing, in the same way that I got used to this thing being the next thing. And then, okay, this is the next thing. And then there'll be a next thing after that until there's no more next things, right? And that'll be okay.
Well, and a couple things I want to say. One, you had mentioned a little bit ago about, it's not that I'm not being positive and things like that. We hear a lot of the toxic positivity stuff out there. You need to stay positive. You need to stay positive. Well, I just don't think that we are always able to stay positive. No. And we can be working on things in our survivorship to help with our mental health and help other people in one group. And then you can also be really fucking pissed off too, and really like super depressed and anxious.
I'm glad that you swore first, because now that gives me the ability to swear, so we're good.
Yeah,
no, but it's true. I mean,
that's what I talk about. And on my podcast, it's like, it's okay to feel this and this. Two things can be true at the same time.
Exactly. I can be really defeated and depressed that I'm working with an and still very happy that this part is over and this chapter is over, and still be, relatively positive, even though I'm frustrated and everything else, I'm still going to keep a positive attitude, right? There is such a thing as toxic positivity. And I think that comes when you're forcing yourself to be positive when you're not meant to be, right?
Right.
I allow myself to feel negative emotions, and really, I mean, thank God I have, my therapist is as good as she is, right? She's wonderful. But she encourages
mine too.
Yeah. I mean, I think to be a cancer therapist, you got to be pretty wonderful. She encourages me to feel all these things, right? And I'm an emoter. I mean, I wouldn't be doing this if I couldn't express my emotions, right? I'm that way anyway. So yeah, it is a difficult place to be, but you eventually have to pull yourself out of that. There was a story, a woman 2 days ago, a mom from Mississippi wrote me, and she wrote me on Instagram, and she's like, so I was diagnosed 6 months ago. I'm 30. I think she's 31, but way too young.
Yeah.
And she was diagnosed 6 months ago. And she said, and normally I'm okay, but this morning I'm just crying and I cannot get out of bed. And I was just scrolling and I found your videos, and I've watched like 100 of them. And it's true. Like, she was liking videos from like a year and a half ago. I'm like, who the heck is liking this video that I didn't remember producing? But like, she went back and she liked a ton of videos. And she said, and you made me get out of bed this morning. And I said, thank you. I said, that's a wonderful sentiment, but I didn't do anything, right? I didn't get you out of bed. You got yourself out of a bed using a tool that you found on the internet, but I didn't get you out of bed. And I think that was an important distinction, where she then felt empowered to go on with her day, which I think was really important. And she said, you know what, you're right. And that makes me feel so much better. And she went on with her day. And, that's the kind of personal impact that I love and I crave from this, right? That's the kind of thing. There was a guy that he shared with me that he was diagnosed 12 years ago with breast cancer. And the only people that knew were his 2 kids, his mother, and his wife. And he said that, I've been watching your videos for about a year, and about a month ago, I finally was brave enough to put on my Facebook profile that I'm a breast cancer survivor. He's been in remission for 10 years. It's not like he's actively fighting this, but he had never been brave enough. And he said, and I got the courage from watching you to just simply change my profile to a breast cancer survivor. And I said, I'm so proud of you, because that's a huge step for him. I don't know this guy from anybody, but I know that if he didn't tell anybody for 12 years, that changing it on his Facebook profile is a huge step. I said, you don't have to do what I'm doing, right? You don't have to be out there, trying to save the world. But you can try to save people in your own little corner of the world. You've got 23 friends on Facebook, and they all now know that men can get breast cancer. You've changed some lives. You've potentially saved a life. And so those are the kinds of impacts that I want to have. Those are the kinds of things that I'm hoping that we have on a regular basis. Those are the kinds of things that are the most impactful to me in this journey on what I'm doing right now, is those individual outreach where somebody feels a little bit more brave, somebody feels a little bit more courageous, somebody feels like they can go on with their day because of something I posted, right? And great, that's the whole point of this.
Right. And, you were not diagnosed that long ago. It was only 2023. That's after I was diagnosed in 2022. And by February of 2023, not even a year later, is when I was sitting in a space where I had just retired after teaching for 20 years. And my whole entire first year of retirement completely changed from what I had originally planned. I had another podcast that I was going to support teachers, and it was all set in motion. And then wham, got breast cancer, found out literally 1 week after my retirement party. Everything changed. And you can tell your wife that. I took my calendar and I mapped out when my chemos were, all the medications that I needed to take before and after and all that, when I was going to finish, all of that. Everything changed by the second treatment because I got COVID and I couldn't get chemo. So they had to push it off a week. And God dang it, I had to change my whole entire calendar. So I am that person too.
There's a binder over there. There's a Trapper Keeper binder over there that's this thick, that since the very first day that she writes all of her notes in. And then you can see by week 3, she's scribbling out things and everything else. It's the same thing. Yeah. Same thing.
Yeah. Oh, I feel her. And every time somebody reaches out and says, hey, I just got breast cancer, one of the first things I say to them is, I just want you to be aware that things change and you have to sort of be flexible in what you're hearing and what actually happens. Because I was so blown away and overwhelmed and angry. I mean, I had mental breakdowns, all the things, because things were not going the way that I thought they would. And I was learning all these things that I never even knew. So by that February of 2023, I was like, what am I going to do with my life? I have no purpose. I was sort of suspended in this deep depression. And that's when people were like, well, you should write a book. And I'm like, I don't want to write a book. I love writing, but that's not something that I really would like to do. But I do know how to have conversations and I do know how to podcast. And so that's where Test Those Breasts was born. And exactly 1 year after my diagnosis, June 11, 2023, is when I released the very first episode of Test Those Breasts. And I did it as a healing mechanism for me. And it turns out
Mm-hmm.
that it was a healing mechanism for so many other people. So that's why I continue to do this, because I do hear from people from all over the country and the world. I've heard from people from, like, all over in other countries saying, "Hey, I found your podcast and my sister was just diagnosed and it's because of you that blah, blah, blah." And, or, "Hey, I just want to let you
Mm-hmm.
know that I listened to such and such podcast and it's because of you that I went in and got my mammogram. I'm only 25 years old." I mean, these are real stories. And so what I want to ask you is, what made you start doing what you do in your survivorship to help other people? And I know that part of it
Mm-hmm.
is a healing mechanism for yourself too.
Mm-hmm. It is. So I think I've been doing social media for decades, right? And personally and professionally, right? So I've been keeping a daily diary on Facebook since about 2008 of our family history. There's something on there every day. So when we go through Facebook memories, it's fun now because there's almost 20 years of Facebook memories on there that we go through
Yeah.
every day. But I've also worked in social media for almost that same amount of time, right? I was a marketing director, social media. All those things were part of what I did. And so when I got sick, I was like, well, I'm just going to sort of do what you're on social media in the cancer space, right? You see the hundreds, thousands, the tens of thousands that are people out there documenting their journey, right? And they're doing it, and there's so many people, and a lot of them are, I'm just going to say it, really sad and really depressing because they're just capturing all the worst parts of their journey, right? And yes, I understand the need to get some of that out. I do, because not every post that I do is chipper. But I will say that as I started documenting my journey, which I think was very similar to a lot of other people. Hey, I'm going to chemo today. Hey, I'm doing this today. Hey, I can't eat this today. It was just sort of the things that you were experiencing during chemo. What I found is that people were paying a little bit more attention to me because I was a guy, right? And so I'm like, all right, so, I'm a marketer. I understand where to take advantage of opportunities that you see in the marketplace. And I start looking around and I'm like, wait, nobody else is talking about this. Literally nobody else. And so again, as a marketer, as somebody that I'm going to take advantage of a hole in the marketplace, right? And so I just start talking a little bit more about male breast cancer rather than my personal chemo journey that I was on at the time. I would start interjecting a little bit more about, hey, did you guys know that this was the whatever, and start interjecting some more education into my posts. And people start responding to that. And I'm like, well, all right. And how that translates to what I'm doing now is about 6 months into me documenting my journey and me seeing nothing in the space, or very little in the space. I don't want to say nothing because there are some people that are trying and doing good work for male breast cancer out there, and they're trying. But I also know that if I took all the skills that I had collected over my 25-year career, right? In the military, I was a broadcast journalist and a combat cameraman, right? Those were my jobs in the military.
Wow.
So I know video, I know voice,
Yeah.
I know, Robin Williams and Good Morning Vietnam, that was my job. I was literally a Marine Corps DJ. That was my gig in the Marine Corps. That's why I can do this now, right? Because I had a morning show talk show. I had a morning talk show where, you give me a topic and I can talk for 4 hours. And so like, this all sort of came, it was all these disparate skills of branding, of creative, of advertising, of social media, of being able to talk on camera. I've been a keynote before. I've been an MC before at galas. I've done all of these things, right? And so I finally said, okay, well, I can either just be Jake Messier, right? And just be documenting my journey, or I can be, quote, the guy with stage 4 breast cancer and make it a branded channel and turn all of those skills that I know how to use and all those levers I know how to pull in social media and grow this like a branded channel. And that's what I did. TikTok and Instagram were my base channels. And we started, and I was like, well, I'm just going to see where this goes. And it exploded, right? And I'm going to say exploded to the point where I'm very well aware that 50,000 people on social media does not an influencer make. I mean, I'm very well aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
However, 50,000 people in the cancer world and 50,000 people in the male breast cancer world is a lot of people having a conversation about male breast cancer. And that's where I started getting attention of some of the major breast cancer organizations, right? Like Susan G. Komen Foundation, the National Breast Cancer Foundation. Some of these major organizations were like, hey, who the heck is this guy talking about breast cancer? And that sort of started the snowball of, okay, well, if I start bringing in other organizations and start talking about these other things, then, that led to me going to the National Breast Cancer Coalition's project lead training last summer, which was a huge step forward in my advocacy, because I didn't even know what an advocate was and what that all meant. So I went to their training and went to this boot camp of advocacy training, and it was great. And I hope I retained 10% of what they tried to teach me. It was amazing. But like from that point, I was like, oh, okay, I can be a voice in this. I can be something that nobody else is being here, right? I can be a guy with breast cancer that wants to be talking about breast cancer in the media, right? And whatever social media, podcasts, the mainstream media, whatever that is. Yes, there's about 2,800 guys a year that are going to get breast cancer in the U.S., right? It's not a lot as compared to the number of women, right? But of those, there's maybe 10 to 12,000 survivors in the U.S. right now. There's not too many of those guys that have A, the willingness, or B, the skill set to go and do what I do. So why would I waste that opportunity? And I take that charge really seriously. I'm not monetizing my channels. I'm not making any money off my channels. I am literally doing this for the good and the sake of the other 12,000 men out there that have, whatever, they're lining up behind me as the spokesperson for male breast cancer. Great. I unwittingly take that title on, but that somebody's doing it now. Somebody's out there doing it. And if what I'm hopeful for is that I'm just in this long history timeline of male breast cancer, I'm just a guy that advanced it a little bit. And then in 5 years, there's going to be somebody that comes along that does it way better than I do. And I'm going to be thrilled when they surpass my follower count, because that's going to be that men are getting served more. That means more people are going to be saved. And that's like, it has nothing to do with my own ego. It has to do with literally saving men's lives. And that's why it's so important to me to be doing what I'm doing.
You can totally tell that is why you're doing it. I mean, I can read that even in your videos and the videos that you post of your family. And, there's just some people you can tell who are doing it for another reason. And clearly you are, even the pre-interview that I had with you, I could tell what a genuine person that you were, and that you are in this space to hold space for other people, other men, and, to give them some sort of hope and, just kind of help them pull themselves out of that darkness, that voice.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's true that it is a dark place, and I've been in that dark place. So I want nothing more than to anybody. And it's not just men. Women are in this dark place too. If you got cancer, let's talk. It doesn't even have to be breast cancer.
Yeah.
There's so many people, and you and I talked about this, and I know we're up on time, and I get that, but like, there are so many people that are in the rare disease space, right? Have you ever heard of appendix cancer? Because I never had, right? But the same number of people that get appendix cancer are the same number of men that are going to get male breast cancer, right? And so I look at that and say, at least I'm in the pink world, right? At least I'm under that huge pink umbrella of the most funded, the most researched, the most well-known. Because I then get to be a part of something if they'll allow me and if I force my way into it, but I at least get to be part of that, right? There's so many people in the rare disease space that are like, nobody even knows my organ exists, let alone the cancer of the organ. Like, people are just like, I don't belong anywhere. And I equate it somewhat to women in the colorectal space, right? There are certain cancers that are gender specific, right? Prostate cancer, cervical cancer. But there are women in the colorectal space. It's not nearly as rare as men. It's about 5% of women are in the colorectal space as the 1% of men. But all of these people, and that's where my audience gets a little bit funny, because you would think in the breast cancer space, most of your people are going to be breast cancer. But a lot of people follow me because they're like, yes, you are saying what I feel. You are saying, like your friend said, like you're saying the things that I've wanted to say or the things that I was feeling. And it may not, you can swap out breast cancer for colorectal cancer or appendix cancer or whatever disease that you have. And I guess I'm speaking on their behalf of the forgotten. So, yeah, I mean, I take that charge really seriously of making sure that people feel like in a really unfair, shitty world that they're living in, that they got this cancer, right? That they're at least embraced by the people that are supposed to be embracing them. And if that's only me and a handful of other people, then great. You know, there's 50,000 people in my community that are the best people on the internet. I can't tell you how much they do for me. I know that people come on and tell me all the time that, you know, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. You're literally saving my life on a daily basis. Those words, the things that you're doing help me get through my day. And I will tell you that I hope that I express enough to the audience of what they mean to me, of what they do for me, of their impact on my life. Because it is as big, if not bigger, in saving my life on a daily basis.
You kind of made me cry there, Jake, because I feel the same way. I have people that like I'm some like God or something, and it's not that. I just want to, give people.
My
that
wife
voice
tells me all the time that it's a good thing I didn't start a cult, right? that I didn't start. Right. I have the personality to lead people in this way. So I'm glad that it's a
good cult. I just interviewed a friend of mine who had colorectal cancer just a couple of days ago. It's her husband who had breast cancer. So he had breast cancer. She had colorectal cancer. So I tend to bring up those topics on my episodes periodically, because I want everyone to be able to listen to the podcast and not just think it is about breast cancer, but I want to, because we go through so many of the same things, regardless of what kind of cancer it is. And we have coping mechanisms that are very similar, whether they be alternative therapy or, traditional therapy. So I don't know. I just feel like you and I are in this space for the same reasons, very similar. And, yeah, and it's not a cult. I want to address one thing before we wrap up. Recently had some inroads with Susan B. Komen as far as making sure that men are included in their conversations. Can you share a little bit about that? Because that's a big deal. That's a big deal.
I appreciate that. Basically, my mantra has always been work with the highest organization that I can work with, right? Or work with the organization that can affect the most change, right? And so in the breast cancer world, I started talking to a lot of the large national organizations, and Susan G. Komen being one of those. The pink walks, the pink ribbon, all those things are a big part of the breast cancer world, right? And after several conversations with them, they put out an open invitation. They were asking people to join their metastatic. Let me make sure I get this right. Metastatic Breast Cancer Steering Committee, which is a committee that looks at every program within Komen and sees where they are falling short on supporting the metastatic community, right? One of the people have issues with Komen. And one of the issues that people have with Komen is that they have not supported the metastatic part of breast cancer as much as they should, right? There's shocking numbers out there that this is not just a Komen number, this is in general, right? That of all the money that gets raised for research, for breast cancer research, only 2% goes to metastatic. Only 2% goes to the one that's going to kill you. The rest of it goes to stage 1 through 3, right? 0 through 3. And so the metastatic community for a number of years has had significant beef with Komen, right? Because they haven't supported the metastatic community in the way that the metastatic community feels like they should be supported. Several years ago, Komen hired a woman who I work with, Casey, as part of their metastatic. She's a full-time person that works in their metastatic initiatives. They have taken the time to establish this metastatic steering committee and brought in metastatic patients to point out where Komen is lacking. It's our job to tell Komen where they're wrong, right? It's to tell them, hey, you're not supporting people in the right way here. And when they put out this open call, they had hundreds of applicants for people to join. And I went through, an application process and then an interview process, and then I was asked to join. There are very few male breast cancer patients that have been asked to be on a national breast cancer board, right? And in fact, I'm still trying to figure out if I'm the first one for Komen, right? We're still trying to do some historical. There's been male doctors, there's been male donors, there's been male funders, there's been male partners. But in terms of a male breast cancer patient sitting on a senior breast cancer advisory board, that hasn't happened. And I'm not there simply for the fact that I'm a guy, right? And that's part of it, that I can hopefully integrate more of, hey, you're not meeting the needs of men here as well. I'm there to really look at the metastatic part of this. But I think that there is a change happening in breast cancer today. And it's not just me who thinks this. There's about 2,200 roughly breast cancer organizations in the US, right? There are 3 that deal with men. 3. And so those 3 organizations have said, look, if we have noticed a change over the past couple years. I'm not saying it's me. I'm saying the time is right for people to start paying attention to this. And I just happen to have a voice and a platform so I can go and do it. But there is wholesale change happening in breast cancer. And I'm hopeful that it doesn't stop with me, right? There are other groups within breast cancer that experience severe discrimination. Certainly Black women. I think it's very well documented, the discrimination that Black women have in breast cancer, right? I think, I can't even imagine being non-binary or trans and not fitting into either side of this, but still having that breast tissue, right? We still have breast tissue. I'm hopeful that the male, the encouragement that we're seeing with bringing more men into the conversation is going to extrapolate out to other groups that are marginalized within breast cancer, that they can feel more part of the conversation. So yeah, Komen acknowledging a guy with breast cancer and then putting him on one of their boards, that's a big deal. It's a big deal. And I'm proud of that fact, not just for me. I mean, I've sat on tons of boards. Right now I'm currently boardless. I sit on Komen, but I usually sit on 2 or 3 boards at a time. So being on a board is not what's important. Is that I'm hoping to help the 12,000 guys that they can point and say, look, we've got somebody sitting on a national board that's representing me, or is at least, I'm gonna hopefully sit down with the executive directors of the 3 male breast cancer orgs, and sit with them over the next couple of weeks and say, look, if I can bring up 2 or 3 topics in my meetings with Komen that are going to help advance what you're trying to do, then please let me know what your initiatives are. If you had an audience with the CEO of Komen, what would you want to talk to them about? Because I have that. And so this isn't about me. This is about all the guys. And so what can we do? it's an open blue sky, which is, what we have is this amazing blueprint from women doing 70 years of breast cancer. We just get to fast track it as men. I don't have to wait 70 years. I can just take the lessons that you guys have learned over the past 70 years and maybe get this done in 20 rather than 70, where we have wholesale change, where that, maybe there's a Department of Education policy change that in health class, boys are taught that when you find a lump, you tell somebody. But that takes an entire generation to get through, right? Of classes and all those other things. That doesn't happen overnight. So I'm not hopeful that all of a sudden one day, there's going to be a massive pink and blue ribbon out there. No, this is mostly going to be a women's disease. But I think what has to happen is men have to understand that they're susceptible to it. I leave you with this, in that I tell people all the time that one of the biggest funders for breast cancer research out there is the DoD Breast Cancer Project. And every year, the advocates have to go in there and fight for their money that they're going to get from the DoD. And I say all the time, because it's mostly men on these congressional committees who are approving this, I say, how much of a different conversation would it be if every man up on that podium knew that they could get breast cancer, right? Do you think that the question of why should I fund breast cancer would be a lot more diminished if every, 70-year-old congressman knew that they could get breast cancer? And it's not just the congresswomen that are beating this drum. It's the congressmen that are like, hey, this could happen to me too. Though a lot less questions would be asked about funding breast cancer if men knew that they could get it. So,
or if one of them actually did get breast cancer and all of a sudden had to go through this.
I was just telling my dad this morning. Over breakfast. I said, not that I want celebrities to get cancer, but one of the biggest things that happens, James Vanderbeek, he just passed away a few months ago from colorectal. But the boom that brought into the colorectal community was a massive, fundraising and everything else, awareness and all the things. And not that I want a mainstream movie star to come down with male breast cancer, but it wouldn't hurt. Like, it wouldn't hurt the cause. And if that's what I'm worried about, it's only going to get out there more. So
one of my partners that just became partners with Test Those Breasts, BC Ruckus, Sheila Mikal, she's the founder, and she's in the policy space. And it's all, about dense breast tissue and making sure that women are able to get supplemental screening if they have dense breast tissue. And she's fighting. Anyway, she was coined as causing a ruckus. That's why she named it BC Ruckus. But she was told that it would probably be a really good idea to not use the word breast when speaking to these men who are making these decisions. And she's like, how do you talk about breast cancer when you can't even use the word breast? What fresh hell is this?
Right. And then you go back to that. I mean, we go back to the very beginning of the conversation. That's the part where men are so embarrassed about being in this women disease, because it's the point where this toxic masculinity doesn't even allow you to say the word breast. Yeah. And it's like, come on. It's just,
this is 2026. Yeah.
Right. We need to grow up and be comfortable with our own anatomy and whatever that is, right?
Well, Test Those Breasts is a newer nonprofit, and my team that I have built in the past few months are about to make a big impact on Northern Nevada. And with that, it is absolutely inclusive of men, women. It doesn't matter who you are. I'm really wanting to reach those communities who have barriers, who are underserved. That is the goal. And yes, there is an age group of 18 to 30. And that's not to say that we won't be teaching breast health classes to other people. We are really wanting to ultimately get into the middle and high school space, which I know Your Lemons has been trying to do. Or it is difficult because you are up against board members and community members who are, blah, blah, that we can't be doing that. But we are trying. but I want you to know that little old me in Northern Nevada with Test Those Breasts, I'm one of those organizations that am very hell bent on making sure that we get this knowledge and awareness out to all of those people, men, women,
Everybody.
everyone who has breasts, which
A
everyone has
human
breasts.
mammal, a human mammal,
Yes,
right?
yes.
It's so basic, and that's
Yeah.
why I think it's
Yes.
so frustrating when we all bang our heads against this wall, right? I think we all do, and some of us, in different ways. But I appreciate you putting the effort into Northern Nevada. I'm sure it's going to spread. I'm sure it's going to be a bigger thing. I'm
So
sure it's going to. And I look. I mean, when you and I talk, please let me know. You never know. I may have a handful of people in Northern Nevada that I can, but I'll definitely promote what you guys are doing on my channels because I think
thank
it's
you.
important. Of course, of course.
Thank you. Well, we are building our partnership ecosystem, I guess, if you will, and that's been really fun to do because I love collaborating. I love it when organizations are able to work together. I am not one of those this is mine, this is yours. No, it is ours. And so I'm always looking
Mm-hmm.
for collaboration and partnership. Well, one of the questions that I ask before we wrap up on my podcast is what kind of piece of advice would you give to someone, man or woman, both, whatever, to someone who has never been diagnosed before?
My messaging on social media has to be very light, has to be handled with kid's glove, right? Nobody's going on social media to be bummed out by a guy with stage 4 breast cancer. And so my message to anybody is almost that very, very basic message that when I first started doing this on social media, I was very like, all right, when I start educating, I'm like, all right, so guys can get breast cancer. That's it. And I'm backing away. And that, if you ask me, the one thing that anybody, male or female, probably more female than male, need to know is that guys can get this. That's full stop, right? Because with that knowledge, you're not going to wait the 6 months like I did, right? You're not going to wait. You feel a lump, you're going to be like, well, maybe I should get that checked out. Or maybe I should tell my wife, who has, since 6th grade health class, has been told, and she'd be like, oh, that's a weird lump. We need to get that checked out, right? And that's why I tell women, like, look, you may be touching your man's chest more than he may be, right? And so if you feel a lump during happy time, then tell him or tell somebody or whatever that is.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a big expansive message. My message is literally, guys can get breast cancer. If you know that and you accept that, then that alone will save guys' lives because that is what leads to that 30% mortality rate. That's what leads to that. If we could just get every guy, I don't think that you could, above the age of probably 15 in this country, I don't think that you could tell somebody that breast cancer doesn't affect women, right? You couldn't have that conversation because it's too pervasively known throughout modern culture that breast cancer affects women, right? I'd love to get to a point where we can have that conversation where it's just breast cancer affects people, right? And that's it. That's the end of my messaging. Because that alone will save lives. And so I don't have any grand big plan beyond that. The grand big plan is just awareness. That's all we're doing. Like I said before, we are 70 years behind women. So it's just awareness. It is, hey, guys can get breast cancer too. I'm not asking you to dwell on that. I'm not asking you to, jump on, Google MD and try to figure out. No, I'm just asking you to tuck that in the back of your brain so that in 40 years, when you're sitting in front of a mirror and you are giving yourself, and you're like, wait, there's a lump, that you don't immediately dismiss it because somewhere along the line, you heard that guys could get breast cancer. That's it.
I like it. I like that message. That's such a powerful, important message. Every time I mention that men can get breast cancer, most people are like, what? And so
Wait, what?
just telling
Right.
them that, just telling that. Well, thank you so much, Jake. Do you have anything to say before we wrap up today? I just want to tell you that I'm so grateful that we found each other and, for what you do for the breast cancer community, men, women, all of us. You are very entertaining too, by the way, using
Thank
your
you.
entertainment style to bring that awareness to the breast cancer community. So if you have anything to say before we wrap up today.
Well, you can find me, as I said before, I'm on Instagram and TikTok at the guy with stage 4 breast cancer, and the 4 is a numerical 4. My website is at the guy with stage 4 breast cancer. You can find me on YouTube at the guy with stage 4 breast cancer. But beyond just me, because it's just me, right? I do want to throw out, if there are any guys out there, those 3 male breast cancer organizations. One is called the Male Breast Cancer Global Alliance. One is called Male Breast Cancer Happens, and one is called His Male Breast Cancer. And they are specific to genetic breast cancer, right? I don't have a genetic marker. I'm not that. So there's 2 that are for sort of everybody else, and there's one that's specifically for those are the organizations and the people that are going to have real information, real knowledge. I mean, I'm just a social media guy, right? Those organizations are doing amazing work for the men in this country who are and around the world, especially with the Global Alliance, trying to do anything they can to help guys out. So, if you're a man in this and you're just like, I don't even know where to turn there first. And if you don't know where to go, just seek me out. I'm at the point now where I can't, I only have 50,000 followers. I don't know how people do it with like 2 million followers, but like, I can't answer all my DMs anymore. I can't answer all my comments anymore. I'm at the point where it's too big now, right? But I make it a specific point that if a guy reaches out, 100% every single time I'm going to write them back. And so I make sure I make space for those guys. And if they're just lost and trying to find, then I point them to those organizations, right? You'll find some help here.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning those about the male breast cancer. And we will put those actually in the show notes. I interviewed Harvey and his sister, Vicky, a couple of years ago. And then I got to meet them in person at the breast cancer symposium, which was really cool. So anyway, yes, thank you. I'll put all of that stuff in the show notes. And I just thank you again. I really appreciate your time, your energy, your efforts, and all of that. And to my audience, thank you again for joining us on this episode of Test Those Breasts. And we will see you next time on the next episode. Thank you again, Jake.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Friends, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Test Those Breasts. I hope you got some great, much needed information that will help you with your journey. As always, I am open to guests to add value to my show, and I'm also open to being a guest on other podcasts where I can add value. So please reach out if you'd like to collaborate. My contact information is in the show notes. And as a reminder, rating, reviewing, and sharing this podcast will truly help build a bigger audience all over the world. I thank you for your efforts. I look forward to sharing my next episode of Test Those Breasts.